I'm going to start this recording and share the screen and see how quickly we can go through some of this stuff and still have it be valuable. Today, I want to review a little bit from last week and kind of expand on what we mean by a real education and what we mean by reading well. I do want to look at Lamott's shitty first drafts in the writing process and the idea of why I assign that at this point of the semester to start getting us thinking about the writing process. And then this week, we have two big readings that are difficult. Bitzer is going to write about rhetorical theory for Wednesday, and for Friday, we're reading VATS. I was able to find PDFs of these online, so I can post an announcement. Is anybody still having a hard time finding the book? Would it help if I posted these readings? I'm just going to do it anyway. So if I will post the readings so that you have these PDFs. These are both Bitzer's piece is a 15-page academic article that is pretty freaking difficult from 1968, a journal called Philosophy and Rhetoric. That's his piece is shorter in responding to Bitzer. He basically says Bitzer's really wrong. And this one's for Friday. It's also a difficult, but not quite as difficult. So Bitzer's going to be a great opportunity to use the reading techniques that we're going to review today. So I want to just preface that this is a challenging reading, but conceptually, like the ideas that he introduces are going to be the ones that we use like a lot. They're super, super valuable. Can we just what does rhetoric mean again? And you can, if your cameras or if you're, oh my gosh, hopefully my brain will start working a little better. You can repeat after me to just feel the word in your mouth, rhetoric or rhetorical. Rhetoric, rhetoric, rhetorical, rhetorical. What does rhetoric mean? You're going with persuasive speech. As an instructor, I really want this course to be empowering to you, i.e., I want you to be able to use this course and do more with your life than you would have otherwise without it, because then I get to go to bed at night and feel good about myself. Do you need to be persuasive to do more in your life? What kinds of situations do we need to be persuasive in? Professional, either to get a job, to get an internship, interpersonal, to convince people that we live with to do the dishes, or whatever. So we're going to look at what this is a little bit more in detail. And this is kind of rhetoric is the key idea of this course that we're working on, how to be more persuasive. And the rhetorical situation, he's making an argument of what the key situation that rhetoric happens inside. I guess a good way to make this point is, we'll make this point a little bit later in the class, actually. Okay, so in order to do this today, we're going to do a free write. I do want to review next week and look at some strategies on critical questioning. We probably won't get to situational analysis, but that's kind of where we're going this week. I do want to look at Lamott's shitty first drafts in writing well. I want to recommend this book that we might get to read a little bit of, but I ran out of time and didn't get to do that at 9 a.m. So we'll see how this goes. And then we're going to spend 5 minutes helping you prepare for Bitzer. Okay, first up, free write. If you have a journal or a word processor is fine. I would recommend finding a journal that you would like to write in. I always wanted to write in journals, but I have like journals that I started and had like 2 pages and then didn't do anything else with them. It wasn't until I found these like tiny little Moleskine journals that I got hooked on them. So I'm like, this is number, you probably can't see that, 154 of these things. I've been doing it for, I don't know, 6 years. It's probably the single best thing for my mental health and growth, really, that I've done. So I want to introduce you to the practice in case it works for you. Every semester, some student says, Boy, I have a writing practice now that has been amazing. Thank you for that. So I want to share this with you. Here's the rules. For a 3-minute free write, you don't care. You're not going for good writing in this. You're just writing. Do not judge yourself while you are writing. Do not measure or compare what you did to what other people might have done, or on a day that you were feeling better. Sometimes you just feel bad. That's okay. The goal is to just write as much as you can. Do not worry about grammar, spelling, or whatever. Just write what is in your head and get it down on paper. So the goal is here, we're really actually practicing a mindful, non-reactive awareness where we're just present and focused for 3 minutes at a time. So you also, I guess for the other key thing is turn off notifications, distractions. You're really just trying to write solidly for 3 minutes. If this feels helpful to you, you can extend that time, but we're just going to do it to give you the sense of that. It's a free write, so that you should be writing whatever is in your head. And so, but I'm going to give you some prompts anyway. Key questions. How's it going? Was there anything from last week that you think is valuable that you don't want to forget? Is there anything from this week that you're happy to do? An easy prompt is, what makes you angry right now? There's been interesting research that if you keep a journal of the things that you're grateful for, that your level of happiness goes up. I also ask myself, what do I need to hear right now that would be nice for me to hear? I usually just say nice things about myself. Okay, this doesn't need to be therapeutic. It can definitely be therapeutic. It's the cheapest therapist I've ever found by a long margin. But for our purposes in this class, you're just trying to get in the habit of writing down whatever's in your head without judging it. You're just doing what Anne Lamott said and just playing all on the page. If you want to write farewell, Mr. Poopy Pants, put it on there. Doesn't matter. No one's going to see it. You can burn it. Cool? So I'm going to start a 3-minute timer. And the goal is to just write as much as you can. You're not going to share this with anybody. And probably it might be beneficial to not even read it. Okay, ready, set, write as much as you can. All right, and maybe another 15 seconds to wrap up what you wrote or your final thoughts, if you'd like. If I'm having to pull you away from the page or the word processor, it might be a sign that this is a practice that's valuable for you. Anybody enjoy that at all?
That was awesome.
There's a lot of interesting research on writing without just writing for yourself, not writing for anything else, just writing. To-do lists, there's very interesting research that that kind of writing is connected to well-being of different kinds. So if you found that beneficial, I would encourage you to experiment making it a habit. It's easiest to do in the early morning before your cognitive brain really fires up. Okay, last week we looked at the key question: what does it mean to read well? What does it mean to read well? How do we do it? Does anybody remember? So preface this by saying it's different for different people. We talked about some key things that are more nebulous but really important. Motivation to read is a key part. Again, if you can find ways, if you go into your reading by saying, boy, I want to do this my way, I want the freedom to do this my way, I'm going to read this however way I want to, I'm free to read this in the way that I want to, that's huge. It's a bummer being forced to do something kind of takes the fun out of it. So you have to kind of find a way to do it on your own terms. Mastery is another key motivation to read, which is I want to get better at something. So interestingly, when you read Bitzer, you could want to just get better at reading, and this is like a big heavy lift, but you might also want to get better at persuasion. So if there's a topic that you're interested in, and the other one is purpose. So if you have some kind of a purpose that's yours, again, this is from the science of motivation. The things that actually motivate us are not grades. If you're just reading to get a grade, your motivation and presence is going to be less than if you're reading for your own authentic purpose. So that's one thing. Then we're thinking about being more critical and analytical. We said that analytical is breaking things into parts and seeing how they connect. So if I'm going to analyze a situation, I'm going to break it into parts and see how it connects. If I'm analyzing a party, I walk into a situation, I might feel more comfortable with my back against the wall so nothing's behind me. And now I can see everything in front of me and I can analyze how these different pieces are interacting, right? And then, so separating them out and then reconnecting them together into like a picture. Like, okay, well now I see there's the host, there's these people that might be causing trouble, there's these people that actually might be needing help if those people cause trouble, that kind of thing. I suggested that really the goal of good reading is being able to tell what's important and what is not. So the key idea here is figuring out what is important. In order to do that, you're going to do a bit of skimming, scanning, and skipping around. Key areas to pay attention to: topic sentences, intro and concluding remarks. I'm going to add to this, this is the way Bitzer is, concluding remarks of sections. We might as well look at this. And so actually we'll give you an example of this here in just a moment. We also talked about multiple draft reading, which is basically slowing down, and speeding up strategically. So some points you're going to slow down and read really carefully, and other points you're going to speed up and read really quickly. We talked about note taking a little bit. either in the margins or on another paper or document, anything that helps you engage with the text. You're going to ask questions before, during, and after. I like underlining and double underlining and making marks in the comments. I like to say things when things are confusing me. I'll say WTF, cross stuff out. I use brackets for unimportant information, and I use underlines or double underlines for super important information. I hate highlighters, but again, you have to find what works for you. It's funny, I wanted to bring up Cornell notes. Did anybody learn Cornell notes in school? I brought that up on my, did anybody not enjoy them? Yeah, why don't we go there? Did anybody enjoy them or find them valuable? Or is it just
I like them.
You like them?
I think they're useful.
Yeah, the notes I take now are like a version of Cornell notes, kind of. Like they're very much based off of them.
And so for people that haven't encountered Cornell notes, what's the main idea that you have kept, Adele?
I've kept the like Roman numeral stuff, and then kept like having a column with like a topic and then notes on the right side that like come out from each other if they're like part of an idea.
You basically, I understood it as like you're on the left side of the page, you're like taking down the key ideas of an idea, or like the key, like you're writing from the text. And then on the right side, you're making your own thinking about that. You're either asking questions or making connections. It's like the right side is for your thinking and the left side is for notes of the source. Am I remembering that right?
You could be. You probably are.
Yeah, I learned a slightly different version, but kind of same idea. Like it's a smaller column on the left, and that's kind of just the heading, the main idea. And then maybe like if it's like a history thing, like some history, maybe like key dates or something. And like key titles, and then like everything on the right is kind of like full definitions, full descriptions, like kind of full notes on it.
So you could do like keywords, key terms on the left.
Yeah.
So you could just skim and see that, and then on the right, fuller descriptions of those.
Yeah, it's super. I like it for like when it's the day before the test and you're trying to go back in your notes, figure out where stuff is. So it's just like bam, right there, like just read off right off of that heading.
That almost like that makes me think of the way, I don't have an example of this, the way notebook paper is set up, where there's that margin on the left anyway, where you can kind of like make notes of yourself of what is on there. It's almost like tagging stuff. Like you use hashtag.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to try to get a good example, but you know what I'm saying. I also think the other thing I didn't say is a vocabulary list. I like to keep these kind of separate, or at least have a way of marking these words. So I'll do a squiggly underline for words that I don't know, or things that I think are confusing, or just like, what is going on? Or things that are wrong, in my opinion. I will squiggly underline or use like DF for define. Any other markings like that? DF equals define this term. So, but you are trying to find a way to organize. I really like the idea of just keeping the key ideas in one place so you can easily see them, and then writing on them. That's nice. That's tight. Very, very, very cool. Okay, how this might work. Let's look at some multiple draft reading, slowing down and speeding up strategically. This is Wednesday's reading. Bitzer's The Rhetorical Situation. From Philosophy and Rhetoric, 1968. This is big information for me because I am not interested in this at all. I'm just imagining a student. Does anybody read Philosophy and Rhetoric journal? No. This is not generally this is not light reading. And he says, if someone says this is a dangerous situation, his words suggest the presence of events, persons, or objects which threaten him, someone else, or something of value. If someone remarks, I find myself in an embarrassing situation, okay, so it seems like he's talking about the situation. When I ask what's a rhetorical situation, I want to know the context which the speakers create rhetorical discourse. How should they be described? So what is a rhetorical situation? Seems like his question. The presence of rhetorical discourse obviously indicates the presence of a rhetorical situation. Well, thanks. That sentence doesn't do anything for me. Oh, I see. He's giving some examples. Gettysburg Address, Churchill's address. Okay, I might come back to that to help me understand it. No major theorist has treated the situation thoroughly as a subject in rhetorical theory. Okay, so he's still writing about the situation. Last one, I hope enough has been said to show that the question, what is a rhetorical situation, is not an idle one. Ha! What do I see when I read this sentence? Everything up above here is basically arguing that we need to pay attention to the rhetorical situation. And since I'm not sure that I need to do that, like I don't know that I care about that. I'm just reading this. I'm gonna actually like kind of mental note, I'm not gonna read this whole first section as well as the other parts. I propose, therefore, in what follows to be a theory of situation. This essay, I wonder if I can make this bigger. Is this too small for people? Can we see it? Okay. There we go, Apple Plus. Boom. Okay, so now we have section 1. It seems clear that rhetoric is situational. Finally, I do not mean rhetorical discourse must be embedded in historic discourse in the sense that a living tree must be rooted in soil. No idea what to do with that. Moving on. In order to clarify rhetoric as essentially related to situation, we should acknowledge viewpoints that is commonplace but fundamental. A work of rhetoric is pragmatic. Oh, it's one of my favorite words in the English language. What does pragmatic mean? Practical, effective, useful. It comes into existence for the sake of something beyond itself. It functions to produce an action or change. It performs some task. In short, rhetoric is a mode of altering reality. Boom. I actually am going to underline that already because I just like that. I like that seems cool. To say rhetorical discourse comes into being in order to affect change is altogether general. Here's an example of canoes. Might come back to that. This whole scene, each utterance is bound up with a situation. So he seems like he's still arguing that this needs to be a situation. These statements of primitive language, aha, he's talking about primitive language above. That's why he's talking about canoes. So he's probably saying that this theory stretches back when we were using canoes and fishing. Yeah. Still a little lost at this point. I don't really know what's going on. I'm making a note of that. Traditional theories of rhetoric have dealt, of course, not with sorts of primitive utterances, but with larger units of speech. Okay. Hence, oh, this is interesting. I'm getting a numbered list. That seems important. Also, it seems like he's giving a definition. That seems important. So I'm going to make a mark next to this, that's a long list. Okay, yes. It is the paragraph before section 2. This is the concluding paragraph of section 1. Star check mark next to this. I'm going to come back to this because it seems important, but I'm still just doing my quick skim. Let us now amplify the nature of the situation by providing a formal definition and examining constituents. Okay, this seems important, especially since I get 3 words in italics. I'm going to put all of these down. Now I'm going to note that this is an exigence is an imperfection marked by urgency, check mark. I'm going to put a box around exigence because it seems like this is the key idea here. In any rhetorical situation, there will at least be one controlling exigence. He's still talking about exigence. The second constituent is the audience. Ooh, I like that topic sentence. I'm going to put a box around audience, and it does seem like this is how he's organizing this. Neither scientific nor poetic discourse requires an audience. Still talking about audience. Besides exigence and audience, every rhetorical situation contains a set of constraints. Put a box around constraints, made up of persons, events, objects, and relations, which are part of the situation because they have the power to constrain decisions and actions needed to modify the exigence. I need a break. So I'm going to take a break, but now I know, actually, I'm going to just finish this section. These 3 constituents, is this the, okay, yeah, oh, awesome. So I needed a break right pretty much at the end when he identified These three constituents, I'm going to read the final paragraph before this section. These three constituents, exigence, audience, and constraints, comprise everything relevant in a rhetorical situation. When the orator invited by the situation enters it and creates or presents discourse, then both he and the speech are additional constituents. So I have some notes about what this is. You know what? I'll just finish my first read. I have broadly sketched a conception of the rhetorical situation and discussed its constituents. The following are general features or characteristics. Characteristics or features. And we get a 1. Seems significant, but I'm really like kind of tired, so I just want to see. That's still 1. Oh, a 2. Ooh, a fitting response. I'm going to put a box around that because it's italics. It seems important. 3. Prescribes a situation, prescribes a response that fits. 4, I don't care. 5, simple or complex, more or less organized. Oh, okay, I don't know how helpful that is, but situations may become weak in structure, so weird structure, weakness in structure, I don't know what that means. Some situations persist. Some situations recur. Okay, thank God. Roman numeral 4 looks like, okay, that's the end. And so now I'm actually going to slow down. When I come back, I'm going to take a break. Then when I come back, I'm going to read 4 because it seems like the conclusion. And then I'm going to come back and make sure I get good definitions of what I saw in section 2. Wherever that was, of the 3 key terms, exigence, audience, and constraints. Does that make, and that took about 10 minutes, I guess, a little less. Does that make sense of what I mean by just kind of getting the big picture of the article? Now I'm going to play a game and say, what of that seems most and least important? What can I skip if I had to? What should I pay extra attention to if I needed to? And now I'm playing a game. Instead of just reading it, I'm like kind of enjoying myself a little more. But honestly, I'm also noting I'm too tired to enjoy myself. So I need to stretch and get outside and come back to it. Because I'm paying attention to my motivation, which I don't have any right now. Does that example help what we mean by like reading well? Again, this kind of model of reading is super helpful when you're doing something that's difficult. And like this reading coming up. Okay, I wanted to introduce, we didn't really talk about this too much, but when that writing is a practice in, or I'm sorry, reading can be a practice in critical thinking. And I guess before you read this, what would you say? How is reading connected to critical thinking? Or do you practice critical thinking when you're reading sometimes? What kinds of things do you ask when you're trying to be a more critical thinker when you read? What are you doing? Yeah, awesome. We get a lot of why questions. Yes. What else? There's kind of 2 ways to approach this question. You could think of, when you're critically thinking, you could think about why the author's doing what they're doing. You could also think whether or not you should trust them. Like, where are they getting their information? Is what they're saying legit or not? Are they trustworthy? Kind of harder to answer, but I am going to say that we are kind of looking at why the author's writing, what incentives do they have, maybe publicity, clicks, or shares. How do they want to help? What value are they providing? My favorite question, you could also say, what do they mean with their terms? I like to ask, like, what can I get out of this? Is anything in this valuable for me? I don't know if that Bitzer article is going to help me or not. It might. It might not. Okay. Do you remember Edmondson's article from last week? In order to get a real education, you're going to have to fight. Was that a good article?
It was thought-provoking, but maybe not necessarily something you should base your definitions off of.
Oh, I like that answer. Good. So was it good or not?
It depends.
Yay! It depends on what?
Like your motivation and what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, kind of the audience, right? Who's reading it? Thank you. So, like, who is reading it? What do they want to get out of it? What are their experiences, backgrounds, values, expectations? Why do you think he was writing that? Do you think he was trying to help, or was he just trying to bolster his own career? Or maybe a little bit of both.
I think it appeals to I don't know, people like our age, like college age students or high school students. Like,
Yeah.
I think it helps to give perspective for somebody who's been further down the pipeline, and he's just providing perspective and insight. It doesn't seem like it's for personal gain, but obviously there's a lot of opinions, so the audience, could take it very differently. If you're a college professor in an older Eastern university, you might not like this article as much as if you're a more free thinking college student.
Or we could say we didn't talk about this too much last time, but if I'm an engineering student going to engineering, someone in a previous semester is like, they were basically like, I'm an engineer and I need to learn how to build bridges. Because if I don't build bridges well, people will die. So this article is just bullshit. Like, I want to build bridges. And I need to learn how to build bridges. I'm an engineer. I don't need to investigate Freud or Emerson to build bridges. I'm like, well, touche. So apparently for your situation, this article was not valuable. But maybe it might help you decide what kind of a firm you want to work for. I don't know. So the question, I really think we could get into an interesting debate about who this is for and whether or not human beings are selfish or not. I think a lot of us, but I'm just going to go here. How many of you want to help other people if you have the chance to? What percentage of our class do you think feels the same way? Generally wants to help if they can. 100%? I'm going to go with 100% of us want to help. Does anybody want to out themselves as saying, I actually don't want to help? Fuck all y'all. Okay, would you think that human beings are selfish? Do you think human beings are selfish? Like they want what's best for them? How, right? Well, I'm going to say. So I bring this up basically, writers are going to write for their own personal interests, but a lot of good writers are actually writing because they want to help. Bitzer is writing this piece because he thinks we need a better theory of how rhetoric works. We need to figure out why some writing works and other writing doesn't, why some speech works and other speech doesn't. And he thinks he has the answer. So it's worth paying attention to. Likewise, any questions or comments on this? So basically trying to figure out why the author's writing, what are they getting out of it, and what am I getting out of it potentially? Also, where is the author getting this information? Can I trust it? What does the author mean? Okay. Let's look at Lamott. This was a very short and easy to read piece compared to Bitzer. I'm curious what the responses to this piece were, or what the key takeaways from it were. Did anybody get any value out of this or find it helpful? What value is she trying to offer?
I think she was just trying to normalize the idea that all good writing starts with a terrible first effort, is what she says. So, like, she talks about how we kind of tend to believe that all these great authors just like put that down on the paper to start with, but that's really not true. So that can be the reality for the rest of us too, I guess.
Thank you. That was probably maybe my favorite part of it, when he says, or when she says, we think that they show up to their desks feeling like $1 million, writing perfectly formed sentences, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what a great story they have to tell. They take a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their neck a few times, get all the cricks out, and dive in, typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. But this is just a fantasy of the uninitiated. They don't go about their business feeling dewy and thrilled. Good. How many of us feel like it's hard to get our thoughts as we have them in our heads on paper? A lot of people do. I know I do. It takes good writing. Good. So this is another sense of the idea that all writing is rewriting. Other key ideas from this essay, or things that you found interesting?
I actually read Bird by Bird in high school, and for the most part, a lot of the writing was, or the reading was just to kind of put all your thoughts just onto paper and then sift through them later, which is kind of what we did in the beginning of class, where you just told us to like write everything and anything down for 3 minutes. And throughout like the entire book, she kind of just says, take it like bird by bird, which is just like one step at a time, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah, did anybody find her style funny? The back of it, she tells this story that her brother was like studying, or basically, no, he had this semester-long report on birds when he was in elementary school, and he waited till the last minute to write his report on birds, and he had like a complete emotional breakdown. He's like crying at the table because he can't get his work done. And his dad comes up to him and pats him on the shoulder and says, "It's all right, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." So it's like just one little step at a time. Thank you. To get all of your thoughts down on paper, sort and sift later. Exactly. Other ways of thinking about this, or key ideas or vocabulary quotes from the reading that you thought were helpful? I like the idea at the very end of a downdraft, which is just getting everything down. And this is basically what we just heard, but another way of saying it. And then an updraft where you kind of fix it up. And she calls it a dental draft. I like to call this the polishing draft, but where you go through every tooth. So it's like fine tuning. So anything has kind of like a 3-part process. She also says on this last page that there's also the sense of time that's passing. So you don't just write a draft and then revise it. You either have to give it to someone else to help you see it from a different perspective, or put it in a drawer, or just take some time, sleep on it, they say. And then she says she goes through with a colored pen to take out everything she possibly could. So the downdraft, I feel like this is like you overwrite. And then the updraft, you take out everything you possibly can. How much experience do we have making our writing as short as possible in college? Not much, right? Why not?
I feel like most of the time we're just trying to meet like the super long page limits of, and so we're filling in like every possible word that would just take up space.
Someone tell me why that strategy won't work in the real world.
No one wants to read that.
Yeah. No one wants. How many of you like to read long things that could have been said in shorter words? In fact, what's your reaction when you get a sense that someone could have taken more time to make your job reading easier? How do you feel about that writer? It's almost like they're inconsiderate, right? You're like, why didn't you care about me more? I confess, I do feel this way when I get an email from a student that's just a giant block of text. I'm like, why didn't you use the enter key? Okay, there's a problem. So does anybody else have a problem taking out writing in your writing? Like deleting things that you've written? Some people know. I do. I have a hard time deleting something, especially when I like it, or especially when I've worked a long time on it. However, does the reader care if you like it or if you spent a long time on it? No. So if you're arguing for a higher grade from your professor, don't use the "I spent a long time on this." It's not a good reason. So how do you get around that? My favorite key is I use a scrap page on everything. So I never delete, I cut and paste. So I like tell myself, I'm not really getting rid of this. I'm just moving it to my scrap page. And if I want to put it in my document, I still have it. It's like a security blanket. I'm like, well, I'm not really deleting it. If I still want it, I can put it back up. What's crazy, I've been using a scrap page for like a decade of writing. I can think of maybe 1 or 2 times that I've actually put something from the scrap page back into the document, which means my writing usually works better when I delete things that don't need to be there. Here's another maybe kind of fun, maybe not fun thing, but has anybody heard the idea that you should draft drunk and edit sober? Well, it's bad advice. Being drunk is hard on your system. You're supposed to draft buzzed and revise sober. Well, that's also bad advice. Okay, point being why we're reading this, there are basically 5 different stages of the writing process. And this connects to how I hope that if you want to revise your forum posts and you post your new post or reply to your original, however you get it on the forum, when I grade your posts, I can see everything that you did in once. So I can just see like all of your posts, doesn't matter where you put them, including your replies. If you want to practice taking words out on your revision, I would love for you to do that. So you're not going to be, and honestly, all of the page lengths in this class are just suggested for what I think it would take to do the prompt well with moderately decent style. The writing process, this will be the final thing that we do. We're pretty much out of time. Has 5 stages. We're going to come back to this, but it's worth noting that the biggest part of the writing process is reading, pre-writing, brainstorming. Like basically, this is also called collecting. You're just collecting a bunch of stuff to write. Then there is outlining, also known as shaping or structuring. For me, this is when I start looking at topic sentences, thinking about like, how am I going to go from one idea to the next? I like to do this as I'm collecting. So if I find something that's super important, I'm going to like put a tag on it. Say, oh, this is exigence. I have no idea what that word means, but I'm going to define it. Then we actually do a shitty draft. And then we revise. And then we edit. Revising is when I look at the big picture and I'm deleting things, reordering things, re-seeing things. That's literally what the word means. In fact, I don't like this word things. I'm going to get a better word for it. Clauses, reordering paragraphs. That's a sense of revision. I'm trying to make my work more specific. This is where we get flow. Usually doesn't happen right out of the gate. We have to redo it. Editing is the small details. Sentences, grammar, punctuation. You save editing for last because this is some great writing advice. Have you ever been laboring to try to get something to sound right for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then you realize you actually don't even need that whole thing in your paper, and the best thing you can do is just delete it? Those 5 minutes of editing were wasted time. So if you save your editing for last and you don't like try to make everything perfect right away, it's going to help you get everything down. It's going to help you see what's there. Okay, the final thing about this is that this looks like a sequential organization, the way that I've put it out here. And in fact, maybe that's not helpful because some people do these in different order and some people do them in ways that some people like to outline after they draft, for example. So you have to just get everything down and then see what your strongest work is and put that in a format. Some people like to read. I am just going to put edit at the end because if you think about trying to edit too much up here, you're going to stifle your ability to just get everything down. Okay. As always, if you have questions, feel free to send me a note. On the syllabus, you have this, there's an office hours sign-up sheet that if you want to chat by phone, I like to take phone calls on walks. So if you don't need to look at, if it's, I would kind of prefer the phone, but Zoom is fine as well. But yeah, however you want to meet is good. I have this window of time from now until my 1 o'clock class, basically. And so you just put your name in a slot and we can chat. Otherwise, if you send me an email, I should get to you within 24 hours. Sometimes over the weekend, I don't look at email. So if it's been 24 hours and I haven't gotten back to you, feel free to send me another email and just say, hey, just see if this got buried. I'm just trying to help. And I'm still stuck. I'm trying to help you help me. Whatever. Okay. So do we have hopefully that was helpful. Did we learn anything today? Anything helpful? What was helpful? What did we learn?
I felt like I got some really good ideas for both reading and editing. I liked talking about like having a scrap page. That's something like when I'm writing, I normally I have that where I have those sections and it's like good writing, but it doesn't fit where it is.
Yeah.
And so I'll like copy and paste it and put it at the bottom, but sometimes like it's lost or deleted. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna start that scrap page idea, and then also the idea of like, revising before you edit. Like those are good distinctions. I like that.
Yeah, we're gonna look at those more as we go. Other ideas. I didn't really get to it, but Anne Lamott's piece makes me think of the value of our self-talk. Not value of our self-talk, the quality of our self-talk. I can find this interview if you all are interested in it. An Olympic trainer basically says that the quality of our self-talk, like how we talk to ourselves, is one of the key determinants of the quality of our life. And that a lot of us are just really freaking mean to ourselves, and that's not helpful. So we want to like coach ourselves in helpful ways. And that means talking to ourselves in certain ways and avoiding talking to ourselves in other ways. I think Anne Lamott's piece is good for that, in raising what that's like. That there are voices in our heads that tell us things that aren't helpful, especially if we're reprocessing things of other people that they've said. It's usually why a lot of people think they can't sing, because people have said some passing comment that their voice is terrible, and then they remember that. So, just so as a side note, I can find this link if you want. I'll put it in the chat on the interview where the guy, he's an Olympic athlete trainer, and it's really interesting. But the free writing piece was linked to the downdraft piece, was linked to us kind of thinking about the quality of our self-talk, how we talk to ourselves, how we coach ourselves to get our best performance. So I'll find that now in case people are interested on self-talk. Oh. Yes, Dr. Jim Lair on mental toughness, energy management, the power of journaling, and Olympic gold medals. It's a pretty darn good interview. I will put it in the chat. Basically, he talks about how he helps the people he's training learn to love what they're doing more, and then be nicer to themselves, and how that relates to resiliency, toughness, and ultimately crushing the competition. All right, well, I hope you all are getting all of the help that you need, and I hope you feel that I am around to help you as I am able. So be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other. Hopefully this was helpful. And we'll see you on Wednesday. Good luck with Bitzer. It's an important one, but a challenging one. See you, Elliot. See you, Spencer.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for the journaling piece. I needed that today.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Appreciate that. Yep. Have a good one.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stop.
Who's that?